Take me to the place in the middle of the sun. And we'll sing this song, sing it one by one.
Today's show is brought to you by the brand new podcast, Detective Trapp. Hosted by Dirty John's award-winning journalist, Chris Goffard, Detective Trapp is the story of a detective who fights through her own personal struggles and society's indifferences to bring a serial killer to justice. Detective Julissa Trapp has always wanted to be a cop, and she is, but she's not like other cops. Not only is she the only woman on an all-male homicide squad, but she does her job in ways some might view as unconventional. So when 3 women disappear in Santa Ana, California without a trace, it takes a bold, unwavering detective to seek justice. Trapp fully embraces herself in finding the person responsible for the murders of the 3 missing women. Her search takes her to lengths that might shock you, but she's driven by bringing justice to the victims and their families. From going undercover as a sex worker to facing a man who takes a little piece of her soul with every encounter, there is nothing Julissa Trapp won't do. So we're going to play a preview of Detective Trapp. And while you're listening, make sure to subscribe to Detective Trapp on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. You can also find the link in the episode notes. Enjoy!
One morning in April 2014, Julissa Trapp woke before sunrise and went to her closet.
I know I probably went through at least 3 or 4 shirts. Just staring at trying to decide what to wear.
She would have to make 1,000 calculations that day. Some of her choices would be right out of the homicide investigation manual. Some of them would be influenced by the small army of other cops who watched her work. Some would be instinctive and hard to fully explain.
I remember thinking to myself, this is just like any other interview. Don't let it get into your head.
Of course, it wasn't just any interview. Soon she would walk into a windowless 8x10 room and sit face to face with a man she had been hunting for the last month. To walk into an interrogation room was to play a character, she liked to say, and that began with the right costume.
It was a strategy and advice I got from an FBI agent when I worked sex crimes, that pink is a soft color, it's very approachable, non-threatening, and so that was something that I traditionally wore. I reached for those first, and it just didn't feel right.
At the Anaheim Police Department, where she worked, Trapp was known as a master interrogator. That depended on finding exactly the right persona for the room. Would she be a mother, a sister, a friend willing to listen?
I think part of it was there was people that told me, do you think he's even going to want to talk to you? Do you think he hates women?
One woman was dead. 3 others had vanished. Today might be the last chance to get answers about their fate. If the missing women were alive, the man in the interrogation room might reveal where they were. If they were dead, as she suspected, the man might be talked, maybe tricked, into revealing how she could bring the bodies home. Julissa Trapp had missing persons of her own, and she carried them on her skin, so they confronted her when she stood in the mirror, as she did now. They were represented by 4 black birds tattooed in a straight line under her collarbone. They were swallows, the bird that carries souls. She thought of each one as a kind of scar, but also a reminder of the mystery of fate that had brought her here, to this particular morning and this particular case. For this adversary, she thought it was important to look approachable, but also to project strength.
I'm sitting here trying to decide, what do you wear when you're interviewing a serial killer?
She picked an emerald green blouse.
I wanted a color that looked good on me, but also that kind of signified a little bit of power. Emerald green just kind of seemed to hit it. I wanted him to know who was in control of that room.
Detective Trapp put it on, over the swallows, and grabbed her badge. From the Los Angeles Times and Wondery, I'm Christopher Goffard, and this is Detective Trapp.
Ready or not now, this game's mine to lose.
This is episode 1, All the Missing. Anaheim Police Department headquarters is in a red brick building that cops call The Barn. It's been a second home for Julissa Trapp for most of her life. She now works at a cubicle on the second floor, where she's the only woman on the 8-person homicide unit, or what she calls the varsity squad. The case that would consume her for years, the case that this story is about, began a few miles away in Santa Ana, the densely packed county seat. Women began disappearing from the streets there in the fall of 2013. Trapp would come to know their life stories intimately, and their faces would stare at her from the corkboard beside her cubicle. But initially, the case belonged to the police department in Santa Ana, where the missing persons unit had just one full-time investigator, a civilian, handling nearly 100 missing persons reports a month. The first to vanish was Kiana Jackson, who had just celebrated her 20th birthday. She had grown up in Northern California's logging country and left home in her late teens. She had been living in Las Vegas and had fallen into the grip of a man her mother came to believe was a pimp.
It wasn't like she got out of high school and said, or as she was growing up, said, well, this is what I want to be. I want to go be this.
Kiana Jackson's mother, Kathy Menzies, raised her in a small timber town with one high school and a railroad museum.
She got thrown into a big city and got swiped up because somebody saw her vulnerabilities.
Menzies says they kept in close touch, talking or texting every day.
She saw something funny and took a picture of it and sent it to me, or she heard this funny joke and wanted to share it with me, or, during the day it was, I'm going to make dinner tonight. How do I make this?
In the first week of October 2013, Kiana Jackson took a Greyhound bus to Santa Ana. When her mother didn't hear from her for a few days, she reported her missing to the Santa Ana Police Department. The person she talked to had looked up Kiana's rap sheet and found she had a record for prostitution.
And I thought, but that still doesn't mean she's an invalid person. She's a human being just like anyone else. She has a right to be looked for. He just said, just so you know, prostitutes work circuits. From what I understand now is what he was meaning was, they move from town to town. And I said, well, what you don't understand is, maybe she was working circuits at the time she was talking to me all the time, but she talks to me daily. I see something from her daily, whether it's a voice, hear her voice, see a text message, something.
She called Orange County hospitals. She called the morgue. No trace of Kiana. She called the Motel 6 where she'd been staying. Kiana had left her things in her room and not returned. Weeks passed, and the mother's panic and desperation grew. At the Santa Ana PD, it was not considered a high-priority case. It would be months before police got a warrant for Kiana's cell phone records to determine where it was last pinging. In the meantime, 18 days after Kiana Jackson went missing, a second woman disappeared. That was just a preview of Detective Trapp. To hear the rest of the episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening now.